Kaylee Cuoco and Sam Claflin star in the MGM Plus original series, Vanished. When the man Alice loves disappears on a train to the south of France, every romantic memory becomes evidence. Every intimate detail, a potential threat. She thought she knew everything about him, but she may not even know his real name. 4-part thriller Vanished premieres February 1st on MGM Plus. Finding the truth is a dangerous affair.
Welcome to the Calling the Quarters podcast. I'm your host, Xavier, and you're listening to Season 3, Episode 13, Circle Round. Today, we are joined by Halina Hadas, the best-selling author and visionary behind WitchCraft Cocktails. Julia has mastered the art of blending mixology and astrology with deep energetic practice. Drawing from her experience in Bay Area distilleries and craft bars, she creates beverages with true intention. She is the author of Moon, Magic, Mixology, and her latest release, Mystical Mocktails, is already taking the country by storm. Join us as we dive into 60 recipes for mindful ritual and spirit-free magic. I'll now hand it over to Dean Jones for his conversation with Halina Hadas.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have a returning guest, Halina Hadas. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Julia, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you've done in the last few years since we spoke. Your work has continued to bridge some very distinct areas. For our new listeners, can you share a little bit about your journey, what initially led you to become both a serious mixologist and a practicing witch?
Yes. And I think it's actually perfect to revisit it anyway, because it's actually really connected to my next book, Mystical Mocktails. So as you know, others might know, I began, doing witchcraft as a teen. And when I became of age, I got a job in my local witchcraft shop, as you know, the Mystic Dream, because you went there, right? Yeah. When it was still physically available. And so, just working in a witch shop, we had people from so many different backgrounds. We had an astrologer, massage therapist. Each of the owners had a different tradition, from Wicca to conjure to the fairy tradition. And then each of the people behind the counter, we all had our own things as well. And so part of working in a spiritual space like that is, working with various herbal ingredients and blending them for particular magical purposes. So one part too is, at this Mystic Dream, we would have AA meetings as well. So I was the person that would open, I can't remember, this is so long ago, if it was like Saturday or Sunday. I think it was Sunday morning or something like that. Maybe not. I'd be the person that would open up the shop and greet the AA attendees that would come out afterwards. We would have the AA chips. I would also, for a time, be in charge of putting together the book list for ordering for them. So their, book requests to help as part of, AA, they have certain reading that they like to do. So when I got into mixology, in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have all this amazing craft cocktail stuff at the time. It's almost like 10 years ago now, which is starting to get embarrassing to say.
Yeah.
But still, like, all the craft cocktail, craft brands, obviously some of these were liqueurs, but there's also like, the revival of people loving farmers markets, trying to get as much from farm to table as possible. And so part of that is making syrups and shrubs and things like that. So coming from my background at the witch shop into mixology, I was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to blend together chamomile, jasmine, cinnamon, patchouli, etc. for money, why not, wherever these ingredients are edible, put them into liquid form like a potion? So that's how I kind of started. And then as I went along that way, I'm sure you know some of the people that worked at Mystic Dream, like Joe and stuff, they're sober, or sometimes they wouldn't want to drink. And so I learned to make non-alcoholic versions of my recipes. So that way everyone would be able to enjoy it, or even bartending at PantheaCon, I had mocktail options. Obviously, back then you relied more on things like syrups and shrubs and teas. That's how I learned how to try and make non-alcoholic versions. But now we have non-alcoholic spirits, which just really widens, what's possible.
In your earlier work, you established yourself as someone who brings a grounded, everyday approach to witchcraft. How did you first realize the act of crafting a drink, something so ordinary, could be elevated into a form of genuine spell work or self-care even?
Yeah, well, I think part of what I started off with too is part of doing energy work and things like that. And you're just aware of the plant spirits and the energy that they have, and also how what you eat impacts your body, And so at a grounded level, it's one of the most basic ways to, if you infuse it with intention and also align the right ingredients, that it really does, transmute how you feel or your energy. It can empower spell work or be aligned in spell work. So I think people tend to not think of kitchen witchery that well. Like they think I don't know, I feel like the vibe's much more of the focus on like candle magic and things like that, but truly like you are what you eat, right? And so putting intention into things and getting back to the root of also like beverages and food are part of our form of connecting with each other and creating community.
You have a new book out, Mystical Mocktails, which speaks directly to the growing sober, curious, and wellness-minded audience. From your perspective, what need or desire do you think the community is fulfilling by choosing alcohol-free options? How does that ritual enhance your choice?
Yeah. So like I said, everyone's different, right? So there's, people who can partake in alcohol and it impacts them differently versus other people, they can't, or some people like to be able to choose when or not they engage in that. For myself, mystical mocktails, and this is not something that like a lot of people know because it's something that's kind of like bothered me the last few years. I actually originally included mocktails in the proposal for WitchCraft Cocktails. There's like mocktail versions of my mercurial grounding elixir and of the creative hot toddy that I have for Yule. There was a non-alcoholic version as well. But in 2020, um, I'm learning to work with different publishers now because I have a different publisher for this one. But in 2020, mocktails they didn't care about it as much. So we weren't able to put mocktails into that book. And it was one of those things that I even circled back to the publisher later. I was like, hey, I would like to do this book because to me, it's about having options for everyone at the table. It's about community, right? A lot of us who were into witchcraft or paganism before its explosion online, like we would make community by going to group rituals or group events, for the solstices and equinoxes and stuff like that. And so having options for everyone to be able to partake is a big part of that because it can be magical with or without alcohol. So being able to go back and write this book is like, putting together it feels like a soul retrieval in like book form for me of like finally, I can this thing that I've been, I still have like some of the non-alcoholic recipes from WitchCraft Cocktails that I'm like putting together in a PDF for Patreon and stuff. But it's really about, having options for everyone, and a drink can be intentional even if it's just water.
The concept of turning mixology into a sacred ritual is at the core of the book. Can you walk us through the moment a reader picks up one of your recipes? What is the first step in turning a simple mocktail into an intentional act?
Yeah. So at whatever point you enter into the book, I know a lot of people with like recipe books, they just like flip open to the recipes, and they don't look at the front matter. Of course, like I try and put as much important stuff in the front matter as possible. So there's one section in there. Let me open up the chapter because I have to see what names we finalized with for all of them. But like mixing mocktail magic is like the simplest point of entry where I really talk about how even if you're making, a virgin mojito, or non-alcoholic mojito, how you can turn the act of muddling or adding, fresh mint into something that's a bit of a ritual experience. And then obviously you can grow from there. But every ingredient, like if you open up to the recipes, It talks about the intention for each ingredient. There are optional ingredients. There is, the energies of that recipe, but also the description. There's an inspiration behind each recipe that digs a bit deeper. So for example, in Desert Blossom, part of that is like coming from California and moving to Arizona, how different the desert environment is, and trying to find the wisdom and beauty in the nature around here. And so it uses ingredients that are aligned to the desert life, where it's possible. So we have, things like, agave syrup and, dragon fruit and stuff like that. And it's also made to look like the desert sun. So there's so many layers of like, each thing of really the wisdom of desert and stuff like that. So it's just, and then there's the Beyond the Glass segment underneath. So if you want to add, you deepen your experience of the drink, the Beyond the Glass really takes you to kind of the, if you want to have a little bit of reflection or, meditation, or sometimes there might be a crystal or something like that. And there's also 3 affirmation options for each drink as well. So that's kind of like what you find when you go to a recipe.
One thing I really liked was a key element of the book, which is energetic herbology. How do you approach the magical properties of common ingredients like rosemary or lavender? And how is that different from purely culinary or medical uses?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as you know, sometimes there's a crossover. Like in the case of rosemary, we use rosemary a lot for remembrance in witchcraft, or for clarity or memory of the mind. And then you find research shows that, rosemary is actually helpful for cognitive function and things like that. So a lot of times there's like a crossover between the metaphysical and the witchcraft meaning, and also, studies about what a certain ingredient does. But really, obviously, the leading factor of what I do is my magical practice. So really understanding for each ingredient what we might use it in a spell for. And then also when we're combining all of these different ingredients together, how does the various energies, and intentions meld? Is there, one overall theme or a couple of themes that really that drink could resonate with? So, and then, of course, like to do a little extra research here and there on like some of the research to find, where there's an alignment with, certain studies on, cranberry is good for immunity, right? Or something like that. So.
The book includes 60 mocktail recipes. When you're developing them, did the magical intention come first, or did the flavor profile dictate the magical ingredients? Can you share an example of a recipe where the intention strongly guided the creation?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of both, obviously. I mean, so part of it is when I write these books, it's always important to me that they extend outside of just, a recipe book or whatever it is. And so I like to think about, like, let's say for the mocktails, if someone's entering into this and we're talking about adding intention into what we drink, what are the various phases of life or points of entry that someone's going to be wanting a drink for some, for well-being and, spiritual alignment and things like that. And so I did have certain, points of where I had a specific intention. I wrote a couple down here. Let me see. Obviously cosmically protected, talking about cranberry, right? And cranberry is associated with protection in witchcraft and things like that. And then, it's interesting that it's really good for, immune boosting or things like that. But, that was a situation where I was thinking of ingredients that are good for protection or psychic protection and things like that. So a little bit of black pepper, blueberry, rosemary, or the strawberry balsamic beverage. That's like, where this also comes being in the witchcraft shop. People come in with all different situations, and like the strawberry balsamic beverage, I was like, I really want a drink where, and that's in the connection section, where, let's say there's a gathering and there might be people there that you don't have the best relationship with, so like what's something that can promote harmony, but also neutralize a bit of negativity. And so we have like the vinegar combination with basil and strawberry to help bring harmony, but also neutralize that negativity. Now there's also like the opposite side where I'm really inspired by an ingredient, and in particular, the meaning of the ingredient. So we have the cherry blossom beverage, which actually uses like cherry blossom powder, which you can find online online. It's like super delicious. But that's one of those things where I was just inspired by the meaning of cherry blossom season, in Japan and things like that, and how it's the symbol of like, renewal, but also that the flower shortly dies after. So the momentary nature of life and things like that. And so formulating, recipe like that around that inspiration of, the beauty of the momentary nature of life and capturing that essence.
Your book has 10 specific mindful spirituality rituals. Without giving away any of the magic, can you describe one of the rituals and how it encourages readers to engage with the drink beyond the act of merely sipping?
Yeah. Let me just flip my page here. Sorry.
It's okay.
Let's see. So the 10 different rituals. So part of the beauty of this book is being with a new publisher and having like, this is like the most creative freedom I've ever had in a book. Truly, like even at the beginning, being able to dive into some personal stories and put more of my voice into the book, into the opening and all that stuff. Like I was able to do a lot more than I've been able to before. Of course, in publishing, there's always constraints, there's page numbers and things like that. And so one of the things that like some of the material that I've always really wanted to put into my work, I've been able to finally put into this book. And one of those was those 10 mindful spirituality rituals. I really wanted to put these sections where no matter what you're drinking, like let's say it's, you're making a non-alcoholic margarita with like a non-alcoholic tequila or agave spirit or something like that, and you have a salt rim. Like what are the ways that salt can be tied to your ritual or spell work? Or let's say you're making a simple syrup or, a sweetener of some kind, honey even, putting that in your drink recipe. How could that be aligned to spell work? So those sections kind of dive deeper into specific aspects of the drink or even the garnish, even the ice cube that you're using. It gives you lots of ways that you can easily tie your drink into magical or ritual uses outside of just a very specific recipe.
Every recipe is paired with an affirmation to sit by. Well, why are these affirmations an important addition? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So part of it is, I think affirmations are one of those ways that a lot of people kind of begin to change their thought process, right? I think there's a very important connection I find for myself, and maybe this is the intersection of like energy work and witchcraft, is a lot of times my limitations come from my mind, right? So because I'm limiting what I believe is possible, and I'm thereby closed to the different ways that a spell may manifest itself or things like that. And so for me, affirmations are a big part of how I work to change my thought patterns. And for a lot of people, it's part of bringing that intentionality into the moment. And so I wanted the affirmations. There's 3 options. You can choose one, you can choose all 3. It's also cool because if you do want to do an aligned ritual to your drink, you can take the affirmation you used and like put it on a petition paper, and slip it under your candle spell or whatever it is. But I really wanted something that even if someone is, beginning to make the drink, or if they're sipping at it, they can set their intention, because part of the act of drinking in general is you're nurturing your body. You're taking those ingredients, you're aligning it. And so giving it that specific intention that aligns to what the recipe is really bringing your moment, your energy to whatever that, thought pattern or intention is, and infusing that into your body through the act of sipping.
The Beyond the Glass breakout sections seem designed to deepen the reader's practice. What kind of topics do you explore in these sections, and how do they help readers further explore the magic of the recipes?
Yeah. So I wanted to include a lot of ways. I honestly, I put so much into a recipe that, like in this case, I mean, in past books, like I've had to eliminate like 10,000 to 15,000 words. And this one we did have to like eliminate 15 recipes, because in each recipe, I just like put so much. And I think in this case, in the book, it was good to remove those recipes because the focus of this book is really putting intentionality and ritual into, your beverages. And so being able to dive deeper into each of that for those recipes was really important to me. And so the Beyond the Glass segment, that's what we're talking about, right? I already just like lost my...
Yeah. No, you're good.
the beyond the glass is like at the bottom, of each recipe. It includes something that deepens the magic. So sometimes there's a little bit of a reflection. It could be a focus on an ingredient, or in other cases, I aligned each recipe to like a solstice or equinox. And not each recipe, but there's a recipe for each solstice and equinox and moon phase in there as well. And so that's in the beyond the glass section. So that way you can kind of take the drink into a little bit more of a reflection or meditation. Sometimes there's a crystal or like a spell act. So in one of the drinks, there's like a little sprinkling cinnamon over a candle flame to align the drink to a little bit of like a passion spell and stuff like that. So there's like little ways to deepen the magic of each recipe. I think one of my favorite reflections was the one that I did for what's the name of the drink? Hold on. Sometimes they change the names to sound a little bit catchy than their working name. So I forget like what was it's the Moon Metamorphosis. And that one I have a whole reflection, on the winter season and drawing our energy within, for rest and kind of fine tuning our inner compass and like taking that reflection of that seasonal energy into where we're at in life right now. So that's kind of like, some of each recipe has something a little different depending on what the edge of the recipe is and the intention is to just take it a little bit deeper.
For someone who is completely new to the intentionality of magical thinking, what is one simple tip of piece of advice you offer in the book for making the very next cup of tea or glass of water a little more mindful or magical?
Yeah. And I've got so many like little tips. So it really depends on where you open the book. Obviously, I think one of my favorite ones is like in the what you need. I believe it's chapter 3. Let me double check what chapter that is. What you need to make a magical mocktail. There's a whole section on just citruses. So like, let's say you're just making lemonade, and it talks about how to even use these moments to infuse it with a bit of intentionality, right? Squeezing the lemon or juicing the lemon while thinking about like what you're cleansing out with that energy or things like that. And then also I think the mindful spirituality rituals too, like I said, with the salt section, of how to incorporate salt to an aligned, magic spell or ritual in addition to being a rim on your drink. So those are really like easy entry points. One of them is like specifically ice cubes, like using your moon water or sun water to make ice cubes or freezing certain items in the ice cube. And as it dissolves into the drink, that's a spell too. So there's a bunch of like easy entry points along the way that's really kind of what you want to pick and choose from what resonates with you. Because I like to include a lot of options, but I don't want people to be overwhelmed by all the options. So yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the look of the book. Having read all your works, I really love the color in this book and the photography. I loved how you really seem to add like a sense of what the representation of the drink is with each photograph. Can we talk a little bit about the art design and just even just the cover, which is very vibrant?
Yes. Yeah. This book's really my heart and soul because like, as you said, I did all the photography for it, compared to my first 2 books, I didn't get to, and the photography is absolutely gorgeous, but being able to include a photo for each drink. And that way when I know what the recipes are, the heart and soul behind them. And so I align the photography to whatever, like, it's like image magic, glamour magic in photography form, but for a drink, each element that's included. So the one that's on the cover is actually the Restful Witch. And so really thinking of the dream world and peace and things like that too. There's lavender in the photo and amethyst. The base of the photo, it has like this kind of like mix of different colors, and then the wall in the photo is purple. And so it's kind of like thinking about what this drink represents, which is having, restful sleep, but also we've got like chamomile and things in the, drink that are aligned to the dream world. I really wanted the photography to represent that. Let me think of like another one here.
I mean, so many are really lovely.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, actually, it's the Cosmo Cali Protect. Or sorry.
Oh, yeah, The
Cosmo,
protected.
let me pronounce it correctly. Cosmically protected.
Yeah, it's a play on words of the Cosmo. Like, let me pull that one up. Yeah, so that one, I was like, thinking of protection, right, and things like that. We have a black base, so I should actually mention too, doing the photography, because I've kind of like am someone that never really intended to get into it, and so over the years, like just from watching part of doing food blogging, you need to slowly improve your photography, but it was never something I set out to do. And so over time, I've collected bits and pieces of things like lighting, and then just getting different backdrops online. So I have like a set of different rolls, like photography paper rolls, that I would then clip to this board that I have, and I have a lot. I have way too many. Now I think I probably like have over 100. No, I probably have like 150 different photography roles at least. And so specifically curating, first of all, the floor, quote unquote, and the wall base of like the vibes that I'm going for with color imagery and stuff like that. So let me pull up Cosmically Protected. The base of that one's black. Then we have a salt, circle, black salt circle. Of course, this is food grade black salt, so Hawaiian, not the stuff you buy at your witchcraft shop, because that you should not put on drinks.
Yeah, it's a bit different.
Yes. And then there's like a black candle for protection. There's rosemary. There's smoked rosemary. So I did a lot of photos. Sorry, I don't know why I don't know if this is like recorded video wise, but I'm as if I'm like showing it to a screen here. So it was like a bit of smoking that was happening with the rosemary, that I wanted to get that smoke of like the appearance of a veil and a little bit of protection. And then actually the base that the drink is sitting on is shungite. So using that same layer. So and actually the wall is black, the base is red, so thinking of also red as a bit of a protection element. And there's actually a cloth in the background too to like further that. So it's like each element. Let me think of like another example, because I just like, honestly, the photography is one of my favorite things.
And I want to also mention that as a mocktail, it's very yummy. It looks very yummy. It has all the things I like.
Oh my God. Like, and it's just like trying to like work with the color and the symbolism of color that we also work with in witchcraft, and like what elements, luckily I have like a lot of crystals, to like put in wind here. So like, Empowering Earl Mule, we actually have a carnelian stone there, because part of the purpose of this drink is empowering, with action and power and victory. And so I love the desert blossom one. I know I talk about that a lot, because that one, the whole point is there's dragon fruit, and then you pour orange on top, like orange for the sun. And so it looks like a desert sunset. And there's actually like this piece of like petrified wood that looks a bit like sand, but this is from my husband's grandfather, was a geologist in Arizona. And so like when he
nice.
That was one of the things that I was able to take from him. And then there's a bit of that white base and a red background. And then this I don't know what flower this was, but I just got it from like Trader Joe's, and it's just like a dried, I don't know. So it's like the whole imagery of it, a little bit of like smoked salt and stuff, and like thinking about how I can communicate the representation of the drink, which is, the wisdom of the desert, being able to persevere through harsh circumstances and have this colorful drink, that also emanates the desert sunset, to portray that vibrant life and perseverance in the midst of, the desert and things like that.
Mystical Mocktail speaks to the modern witch who wants to live magically in all moments, not just at the altar. What do you ultimately hope readers take away from the book regarding the intersection of daily routine, food writing, and spiritual practice?
Yeah. I think people are going to come at it from very different angles. And I think part of my hope is to show people, again, like no matter what they're drinking, how it can be magical. The beginning of the book really focuses on the symbolism of the cup and how, what we ingest, how that's aligned to how we nurture not just our bodies, but our spirit, our emotions, our minds, and things like that. And when you purposely drink something and align that moment to an intention. And then, of course, being witches, we like to add meaningful ingredients that resonate with that. It really does empower you to align your energy to wherever, you're working on in life. And so there are certain things that I think that are important that I cover in this book, because non-alcoholic spirits can be hard to navigate. So I talk a bit about that. They're all optional in this book. So that's one of the optional ingredients that I put. So there's versions of the drinks with non-alcoholic spirits, and there's versions of the drinks without. And then there's also sections on how I talk about even using tea as a replacement for alcohol or as a base in your mocktail and stuff like that. So there's a lot of, depending on what someone's really looking for, it's just a hope to make it more accessible and show you there's a lot you can work with. Like, you can even turn your chamomile tea or your Earl Grey tea into a base for a really delicious and magical mocktail.
Julie, I really want to thank you for being on the podcast. I love getting a chance to talk to you about your book. I want to let people know we're going to have links to purchase it or pre-purchase it in the bio. And it would make a great gift for people in the coming year. Thank you for being on the podcast, Julia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Calling the Quarters. A huge thank you to Julia Halina Hadas for sharing her wisdom on the alchemy of mindful movement and magical mixology. If you haven't already, be sure to pick up her latest book, Mystical Mocktails, wherever books are sold. I'm your announcer, Xavier. We hope today's conversation leaves you feeling inspired to bring a little more intention to your own rituals this week. Join us next time as we continue to circle round. Until then, may the circle be open but always unbroken. Good night, everyone.